Do you consider yourself to be a proper arborist? If you do, you'll already know that span rigging is an important weapon to have in your arsenal. If you don't know much about span rigging, then don't worry too much, I've got you covered. I've got some good footage from a job a couple of weeks back where we did plenty of it. I'll share the reasons why I like rigging like this and like this. So stick around to the end and see it for yourself. Hello and welcome to this tree work knowledge video about span rigging. I'm going to try and answer the following questions throughout this video. What is span rigging? How easy is it to set up? Do you need any extra equipment? What are the pros and cons? What's the difference between span rigging, drift line and load transfer? Does span rigging require higher skill? Can it be used for lifting operations? Before we get into the questions at the start of the video, I just wanted to explain what's going on in this job. As you can see, we've got another very wet day here in the East Midlands, but we're working for a new client who have owned this estate for 14 generations. So to put that into perspective for you, they bought this place in 1592, which is 275 years older than the United States of America. So the reason why I'm mentioning that is because these walls here that sit beneath the trees are obviously old, and we definitely don't want to be the ones that damage them. The estate had a arboricultural report carried out independently from ourselves, and they identified a number of these trees down here which are primarily horse chestnuts, and they gave us a specification of work that we need to carry out. This tree here is tree 1. It's on the left hand side of the road for the purposes of this video, and that's been identified that this limb here that grows over the wall and the road is a hazard, so that was to be heavily reduced back to a pollard point. On the opposite side of the road we've got tree 2, which is down for a fell. We can't just fell that completely. As you can see here, it's got quite a lot of weight growing out the back of it, so first things first, we're going to strip that weight that's over the wall off, and then we need to take the height down at least so we can fell it underneath the power line. There's a power line that's in this field here, so we can't just drop it as it is. So my plan is to prepare both trees for span rigging, so there will be some free fall techniques used first, as well as just conventional rigging. In this case I'm just going to call it a basic rigging setup. Anything that's overhanging the wall will need to be rigged down, and my chosen method, my preferred method in the situations like this where you want to move something away from directly underneath, is a technique called span rigging, and I use it all the time. I can't stress that enough. So let's get straight into the questions outlined at the start of the video. Right, so the first question is, what is span rigging? We also call this V-rigging. You'll notice us calling it V-rigging in the video. So it's an extension to your basic rigging setup. Instead of attaching the branch to the end of the rigging rope, you're going to take that end of the rope and attach it to an appropriate anchor point in potentially either another tree, or it could also be the same tree just higher up. Then you have this belly of a rope between point A and point B, or tree 1 and tree 2. You have this belly of a rope which you then attach a pulley and a sling to the piece that you're rigging off, which then falls onto the belly of the rope and creates this V shape in the rigging system, which is why we call it V-rigging. And that fundamentally is what span rigging is. So you're rigging across a set span rather than straight down from the rigging point. So I'm just including a couple of videos here of conventional rigging, just because I think it's important to see what the differences are between the conventional rigging and the span rigging. The piece on tree 2 that I'm rigging off here have a huge swing. And it swings right towards the cherry picker that I'm in, and that's not the kind of thing you want to be hitting, especially when you're actually in it at height. So this is why I was quite keen to switch over to the span rigging at this point. It lowers it in a completely different style. or when the ground team here are trying to flick this rope back to me, it took a few attempts actually, probably cut a few more out as well. I'm quite far away from where they need to flick it, and there is a good way of doing that and a bad way, but you know, I'm really far away and it's really tricky for them to get that rope back to me. So the comparison that you'll see in a minute, where the pulley on the span rigging setup comes straight back to me, you can see over the course of a day or a job how much time this is actually going to save you. How easy is it to set up? So it's actually very easy to set up, and you don't need much additional equipment to what you would normally have in a rigging situation anyway. You've obviously got your basic rigging setup, so you've got your friction device at the bottom of the tree, a cow's hitch for my main pulley, and then going right up high, setting up another cow's hitch with a pulley. Then you've got the option for a third pulley to share that load between the tree. What I will then do is take the end of the rope and attach it to an appropriate anchor point. Now this anchor point can be above or below the piece that you're rigging, and in this video you will see both variations. What I would say in addition to these questions is, if there's any other questions throughout the video that you have about span rigging, then please do me a favour and drop them in the comments. That's perfect. So what was swinging right over to the back of the cherry picker, narrowly missing the walls, now swings nice and controlled right into the middle of the road. That's why I favour using this technique over other techniques like drift line, load transfer, speed line, because it's so easy to do and doesn't require much extra equipment. So do you need any extra equipment? So yes, you do. On top of the basic rigging setup that you've seen previously in this video, you will need just a normal tape sling, steel carabiner and rigging micro pulley, dependent on the size of the piece that you're rigging. So if you start going heavier and heavier, you will need to adapt that, but you can use X rings in the place of the pulley, that's attached to a dead-eye sling or whoopee sling or something like that, you will need an extra long rope. A lot of the time this will potentially double the amount of rope that you're using, so that could be an extra expense that you'd need to incur. As long as you can tie a sling securely to the piece that you're rigging off, and it's got either a pulley or an X string attached to it, and it's all within its capability, then this is the only extra equipment that you need, and it easily, most of the time, it easily fits on your harness and you don't even know it's there. What are the pros and the cons? Pros are you get to share the load between several anchor points that you may not have done without span rigging, so you can go into multiple trees and share the load quite easily between the trees. You also add a lot more rope into the system, so there's more rope then to absorb the weight of the pieces that you're rigging. Another advantage is that I actually find it easier to get the rigging system back. The rigging line is already attached to the rigging point. As long as that is below where the main pulley is and you have hold of the line, that will just come back to you. All the groundsman has to do is pull the rope up and the pulley will slide down the line straight into your hands. Another advantage is how easily you can just switch back and forth to basic rigging and span rigging. I find myself in a situation where I'm going really far out onto the edge of a branch, either climbing or muping, and then what I can do is span rig the top of that piece out, and then without having to even do anything, the rigging is already set up for the next piece, because you can just leave that sling attached and send down another tip-tied piece. So it's got so many advantages like that, and when you start playing with it more and more, you find more and more practical uses for it. I'll be honest, I can't really think of many cons about this style of rigging, because once you get fluid at it, it's really quite easy to just implement at the drop of a hat. You'll need a long rope. You'll need to make sure that you've got potentially twice the amount of rope that what you'd normally need, because it comes down in that V shape. It uses a lot of rope up. But other than that, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't take me any extra time to set up. One more advantage is, because you share the load between various different points throughout the system, you can go a little bit bigger. I've got a bit more faith when I've got a span rigging system set up for taking slightly larger pieces, so this is another thing that will improve efficiency on the job. And as you can see in this video, it's not lowering the piece straight on top of the wall. If I was just using basic rig on each of these trees, what I'd probably find is that the pieces will be suspended directly over the thing that we're trying to avoid from damaging, and then the guys would either have to pull it back over with a pull line or a set of poles. If you want to find a situation where you want to get that piece away from the tree, away from the butt of the tree, this really is a good option for you to use. Yep. What's the difference between span rigging, drift line / load transfer? I've seen a couple of videos on YouTube where people are calling span rigging what I would call drift line / load transfer. The difference is you don't need an additional rigging system set up for span rigging. With span rigging, you're just adding on to the basic rigging system that's already in the tree. For drift line / load transfer, what you'd normally have is you'd be rigging between a span, but you'd have one friction device and pulley in one tree and another friction device and a pulley in another tree, which takes longer to set up, and then you need, you know, one person controlling one system and another person controlling another system. So this is where you might want to suspend something level, for example, so it doesn't one end doesn't drop down and hit an object below it, or where you want to transfer the weight of something entirely into the other system. To be honest with you, they're not the same thing. They're completely different applications. At the start of this section, the belly of the span rigging line is below the point that I need to rig, and that's, to be honest, not ideal, because what it will actually do is shock load the system, because it's got a free fall before it actually catches onto the rope. So in all situations you want to try and reduce free fall and shock load as much as you can, and I didn't have any choice in this situation other than just take the pieces a little bit smaller, and that helps reduce the load on the system. So I'm just taking these pieces a little bit smaller until I'm underneath where the belly of that span rope is, and from that point slightly bigger and bigger until we get down to the final cut. can it be used for lifting operations? So yes, it can be used for lifting and lowering. I'm going to include some extra footage from a different job in this video which shows the GRCS at the base of the tree cranking this piece up. And one of the benefits of this is because you've got that pulley attached to the piece, you get the benefit of a mechanical advantage. So it's actually easier to pull that piece up than it would have been on a basic rigging setup. If you're still watching at this point, yeah, appreciate you watching this far, and hopefully you've learnt something throughout the video, and any feedback would be welcome. So if you could write in the comments if there's anything else that I missed out, or if you think something was good or bad, then please just let me know in the comments and I'll try and make the adjustments for the next one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Cheers.